Okay. Thank you very much for coming. This is the Ann Arbor Real Estate Investors Club Saturday morning series. I teach a lot of classes on Saturday mornings. I have not done them lately for various reasons. But anyway, we're here today. This is a session on one of the fundamentals of real estate investing, which is estimating rehab projects. So whether you are a wholesaler, whether you are a flipper, whether you engage in, it's called the BRRRR strategy, which is the flip to hold strategy, whether you are in the turnkey market, you need to know how to estimate costs because the rehab project costs are absolutely substantial. And in some cases, I've seen it over the years, especially buying distressed properties or foreclosure properties or whatever. The rehab costs can exceed the cost of the property. So, therefore, the importance of it. As I mentioned a minute ago, this class is really elementary. It's designed for, you're just starting out. You don't know what you don't know. So that's what I've designed this course to take you through for an hour of just the top four things that you need to know to keep going. So now you will know what you don't know at a very, very 10,000 foot level. So this is what I teach in the Ann Arbor Real Estate Investors Club. I have classes on planning, analysis, estimating rehab, marketing, which is finding deals, negotiating deals, learning about contracts, foreclosures, etc. You can see the list right here. I also have a YouTube channel, which is just under my name right now, where I've got 18 hours worth of classes on these subjects. And this class is going to be added to it later on. So this is what we do. This is kind of how I teach and what I enjoy doing. So today's objectives, I'm going to talk about really four fundamentals of estimating rehab costs. And the fundamentals are, I call it the big six, which are the highest ticket items on a piece of property that cause the most, are the biggest ticket items cost wise. I'm going to talk about SOW, which is a scope of work document. I'm going to talk about a project management um, aspect of estimating rehab costs. And I'm going to talk about contractors, how to find them, how to deal with them, how to work with them, how to partner with them. And then I'm going to encourage you to create what I'm calling, a pretty granular database of, not only items, but tasks that are going to be involved in every project. And remind me at the end if I forget, because sometimes I go off the reservation a little bit, that I've got a really detailed, well, a pretty detailed 8-page PDF handout that I will put in the chat that you can download and use as a guide going forward. All right. So three thoughts to start off with. And number one is remember the pie. So what's the pie, Brian? So the pie I talk about uh, in the exit strategy class and in the planning class. Okay, so if you are doing a real estate transaction, or I should say, when you are doing a real estate transaction, that's an in and out transaction. Okay, this is not, I'm not talking here about a buy and hold where you're going to hold a property, for an extended period of time, 5 years, 20 years, or a legacy property. An in and out transaction is like a wholesale deal or a flip. Remember the pie. That's an in and out linear transaction. And think about each of these transactions as a pie. And there are only so many slices to a pie. There's what's involved in getting in and cooking the pie, and then what you are able to get out when the pie is done. But there are only so many slices of the pie. It's not an unlimited amount of slices. And so who's going to get what slice of the pie, and how big of a slice of the pie does everyone involved in this transaction get? That's number one. Number two is developing your own system. As I mentioned, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's over 2,000 members of this group on Meetup, and everybody does it in a kind of a little bit of a different way. There are a lot of, a lot of fundamental elements that cross over to every transaction, but everyone does it their own way. And here's where I encourage you to, stay in your own lane. Don't worry about what other people do or how they do it. I mean, certainly learn how other people do it and take things from them, but do it like a recipe, and you can do it however you want. You can follow the recipe to the T, or you can take the basic elements of the recipe and add your own ingredients or adjust the quantities, etc. You get the idea. Number three, this is a thing that I really emphasize, and I do it, number one, because that's the way I like to do business, and it's the way I like to be treated as a professional. And the other reason I say this is because I see so many people who do not do business this way, but treat your contractors like royalty. Okay. Be nice to them, be good to them. They are, I can't say the most valuable member of your power team, but certainly one of your top two or three most valuable players on your power team, not only on this individual project. And you should not think of it that way, though most novice investors do think of it that way, where you treat a contractor like an employee. Okay. I want to encourage you to get in the mindset of treating a contractor as a partner. Okay. And what that means is, yeah, you're going to be paying that person a good chunk of money, but you're going to rely on them, for a long-term relationship. And if you keep thinking of it only in the bucket of this individual transaction, and if you have the mindset that every dollar you give to the contractor is a dollar out of your pocket, it is literally, but figuratively, you have to think of it in a different way. And it's hard for me to describe, but once you get going and get the momentum going with that thought and that approach and that way to build the relationship, it will benefit you in the long runs. Those are the three thoughts to start. All right. Rehab project, all boiled down. Okay. At the end of the day, what is the cost of a rehab project? The cost of the rehab project is labor and materials. All right. Simple. Simple is not easy. All right. Materials, are the elements. And I'll talk about the 400 item spreadsheet at the end. But for an example, 2x4s are 2x4s, and the price fluctuates, depending on a lot of factors. But there are a lot of materials where costs are constant. But when it gets into rehab, your mind is blown. Okay, I just recently had a contractor, my number one contractor friend of mine, redo a bathroom in my house, my daughter's bathroom in my house. All right. I had the project in mind, said, it needs updating. We want to replace the vanity and and the sink and the flooring and all that. And we're going to go with that. Okay, that's the scope of what I wanted done. We get in, I get consulting with my contractor. He says, Brian, Your toilet is 30 years old. You need a new toilet. You're going to have to get one sooner or later. We might as well do it as part of this project. Okay, I wasn't planning on a new toilet. Okay, let's get a toilet. Well, okay, what kind of toilet do you want? Well, you go on to Lowe's.com. There's 226 different kinds of different toilets. Okay, all different prices, all different features. Who knows about toilets? I didn't know I was going to have to buy a toilet. I didn't give a thought to it. I have no idea of what's a good toilet, what's a bad toilet. I'm not going to spend, $1,500 on a Kohler toilet or whatever, and I'm not going to buy the cheapest one. So how do you do that? How do you even figure it out? Well, you do that obviously by overtime, by taking the recommendation of your contractor. My contractor, Gil says, Brian, I install toilets all the time. I've seen, he can't say he's seen them all. He says, this is a good one, or this is a bad one. If you want to spend a few extra bucks, go for this one. Okay. So you got to be thinking about that for absolutely every item on your rehab project. Because, yeah, you can spend $200 on a toilet, or you can spend $2,000 on a toilet. How does that fit in, and how are you going to make those decisions? Well, you're going to make those decisions by preparing and doing your homework and planning it out ahead of time. Otherwise, you're stuck with, oh my God, now I got to buy a toilet and remember the pie. Now I got to give Lowe's a little bit bigger piece of the pie because I didn't plan for the toilet. Or you might have budgeted for a $200 toilet and you have to spend $400 or whatever. You get the idea. So material costs can vary. Likewise, labor costs can vary even wider than the material costs. All right. Because the materials you can compare and contrast and price compare, things like that. Labor, all right, you can get a college kid to paint the house, and pay him or her $15 an hour or whatever. Um, or you can get a professional to do it, uh, and it will cost you more than $15 an hour, I guarantee you. And I have painters who I work with and guys who I have do my own house and I refer a lot of business to. And when you get to labor, especially when it comes to contractors, and most of you on the call probably already know this, you know, it's a matter of trust. It's a matter of who's professional, who shows up, who does what they say they're going to do, who delivers value at a good price. All right. I know investors, because I've seen it through a lot of years, and I've seen them come and they come and go. Is they're only driven by that pie, and they're only driven by them, the investor, getting the biggest piece of the pie, and constantly, again, treating the laborers and the contractors as employees. All right, which they are, but are you a good boss or are you not a good boss? Do you have the long-term view in your picture? All right. So the moral of the story here for me personally, and this is just me, I'm willing to pay more if this is a good contractor, if he does what he says he's going to do, if he does a good job and he gives me a fair price. And what's a fair price? A fair price is what he's worth. All right. My contractor, you know, he's been in the business 40 years. All right. He's not cheap. You're not paying him for the hour. All right. This is like anything, a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. You're not paying him $100 an hour or $200 an hour or whatever it is. You're not paying him for that hour. Okay. You are paying him for the value that he brings to that hour. All right. That's the same in any profession, any real profession of expertise. As I said, doctor, lawyer, dentist, contractor, plumber, etc. You're paying them for the value they bring to that hour. All right. So That's how you have to think of this going into it. And all of this estimating rehab costs is preparation. And again, I'm teaching you this stuff and I'm repeating myself because it's mistakes that not only I have made over the years, but mistakes that other investors and clients of mine have made over the years, where it finally gets through to the point where it dawns on me and says, well, wait a second. If I had prepared a little bit better, I wouldn't be making these mistakes, because everybody wants everything instantly. Okay, and it's a natural progression of a real estate transaction, especially if you're flipping a house, because time is money, and so every day that house is in the process of being rehabbed is money out of pocket for the investor. All right, I talk about that in the project management piece of it in a minute, but you get the idea. So it's naturally just a drive to get it done quickly, get it done the cheapest way possible, and go and go and go. And I was reading something else this morning, about preparation, and yeah, it's like, if you're trying to eat healthier and or lose weight or get healthier or whatever, what's a good way to do it? Well, you meal prep, okay? You chop up your vegetables, on Sunday, and you make 5 meals, for the week. So you're not scrambling. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's the same concept here is preparation. The more prepared you are, the better you are. Oh, the moral of the story is I get it all the time. Investors, oh, I'm a new investor, I want to do this, I want to do, well, time out, you're going to have to learn how to estimate rehab costs. I don't need to do that, I'll just have my contractor do that. Or I don't need to do that, I'll just have my property manager to do that. All right, well, I'm going to get into it here, shortly, but yeah, you can do that, and you can have your contractor do that. You can hire him, and you can have everything pulled out, and guess what? The contractor has a car accident, God forbid, or gets sick or whatever, and can't do it. Guess what? Now you're hung out to dry because you didn't prepare, or you thought you prepared, but you didn't prepare. All right. That's the moral of the story on that one. Here's the big six. All right. And I talk about the big six, and these are the things that is part of your due diligence when you're considering buying a property. All right. These are the six, which are the big, in my experience, are the biggest ticket items in a real estate transaction. And I'm talking about a transaction where you're buying a property or you're wholesaling a property, and you're trying to estimate the rehab costs so you can sell it to a person who's going to fix it and sell it. Okay. These are the big six items. This is due diligence that you can do to up to a degree before you put pen to paper writing an offer on a property. All right. This I teach in my due diligence class as well, is there's due diligence before money exchanges hands and before contracts get signed. And then there's due diligence afterwards. This is due diligence that you should get into your DNA, your daily natural activity, right up front. The minute that you start looking at a property on Zillow or drive by, or your realtor takes you out or whatever, should be your first pass. Okay. When I do deal analysis, I do the first pass, back of the envelope pencil analysis, and then you jump through these hoops or these check boxes, all right, and see where you are on that before you decide to commit more time and effort to the next step. So these are quite simply the biggest ticket items on any rehab, all right? And any one of these six can potentially be a deal breaker, again, depending on the property, depending on what the price is, depending on what you're willing to offer, depending on your, analysis of the after repair value, off that, all that stuff any one of these can blow your piece of the pie out of the water, and you're looking at a project and then you're saying, wait a second, time out. Here's all the pieces of the pie. What's left for me? And there's no pie left for you, or worse, you gotta bake another pie where you don't have any ingredients to bake the pie. All right. So I'm going to give you a list of resources where um, you can start to learn about this. All right. There's a really advanced element which we can use AI to do this, but we're not going to do that yet because I don't I don't know enough to teach about that, but I don't want you or myself to rely on AI the way we used to say, oh, well, I'll just rely on my contractor to give me all these estimates and to give me these prices. Where I don't want you to have the mindset of, oh, I'm going to cut the corner and I'm just going to have AI do this for me, and analyze what my rehab costs are going to be. Because, all right, AI is there and it's a extremely valuable tool, and we do use it and will be using it more and more as time goes by. But again, I teach it, to still know the old school way, because, the internet can still blow up, or AI is out there, but it's only based on input into computers, and it doesn't always translate to what happens in the real world when you're out there. When you're out there, you say, well, AI told me that this was going to cost this. Well, that's very nice, but that's not the real. That's not the real world. You have to, yeah, that because that's why it's called artificial intelligence. It's not real intelligence. All right. But anyway, this stuff can help you. So you're gonna need. I'm gonna give you, websites and resources and stuff like that. And there's tons of stuff out there. But roofing, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, foundation, landscaping. These should be the unspoken six that, again, every time you look at a property, or if, I send out hot lists of thousands of listings out there. And the first thing you're going to want to look at, and this is the first thing that I look at, as an investor or as a realtor on behalf of my investor clients, I want to know as much as I can know about the condition of these six items before I take another breath. All right. I want to know as much as I can, as quickly as I can. Because again, any one of these can blow a deal. Any two of these can blow a deal. 4 or 5 of them certainly can blow a deal. But there are also other things that you will learn over time. Like, for example, gentleman on the call is in the roofing business. There's another guy in my Thursday group who is an electrician. Okay, so electrical, he knows electrical. All right, he knows electrical like the back of his hand because he's been doing it for 30 years. So he knows his way around an electrical problem, where an electrical problem for you or me might be $10,000 or $20,000, or pick a number out of a hat. Whereas he can go in and look at the same electrical thing, and because he's in the business, he can say, well, I'm an electrician. So number one, I can do this work and don't have to pay someone else to do it. And I know I know how to rewire it, or I know how to do it. To that, so me and him are looking at the same deal. All right. And to him, he says, well, I can do the electrical. If the electrical is a potential, it's not a deal breaker for him, but it might be a deal breaker for me. So hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. But the idea is to partner with people who you trust in these elements. And I do this all the time because I've been doing it for a number of years. Because guess what? It's also an opportunity for a job for people who are contractors on your power team. For landscaping, I can call up my landscaper and say, "Hey, Chris, I'm thinking about buying this property on, 123 Main Street. I'm not sure about the landscaping. I got an idea what I got to can I do? Can you put your eyes on it and give me your thoughts about it?" Okay. And he'd go, "Yeah, Brian, sure, I'm happy to help you," because guess what? I've given him a lot of business over the years, and we have a great relationship. He goes, "Yeah, I'll drive by. I'll drive by and let you know." And so that's part of the process of estimating rehab, is utilizing your power team. All right, you're not gonna call up contractors, and they will. There was a day when contractors would come out and give you an estimate, okay? But over time, they found out that a lot of people, and not exclusively investors, but that people would waste their time, and they would come out and give estimates and give estimates and give estimates and spend a lot of time, but never get hired for the job. So they finally say, "Look, I'll come out, I'll give you an estimate, but I had this happen with the most recent deal I did with a project that needed everything. Is a new client, a new buyer. He said, he needs an estimate for a new roof, for masonry, for HVAC. We talked to multiple different contractors, and they said, "Yeah, I'll come out. I'll give you an estimate, but it's going to cost you $400. And if you hire me, I'll credit you the 400 back." All right, that's what happens, and you can expect that until you build a relationship with this HVAC guy, or with a roofer, or with an electrician, or whatever. Okay, that's another element of it. So the more you can learn, the better off you are up front. But these are the things you want to think about. And again, ask your realtor, "Hey, what do you know about this?" "Well, I'm your realtor. I know what's in the multiple list service." Okay. So all I know is what you know at that point. But what can you find out, Brian? Okay, well, who's the listing agent? All right. Oh, I know him, or I don't know him. All right. I know the listing agent. Okay. I say, "Hey, Bob, I have a client interested in this property here. I see such and such and such and such. Is there anything I need to know that's not on the MLS ticket?" And he said, "Well, yeah, there's mold in the basement, but it's not that bad, or whatever. So I didn't think it was important to put it on there." And again, this is the trust I have as a buyer's agent with a listing agent. I go, "Come on, what's the story on this house?" "Well, you know, bypass it," or whatever. Or, "Oh, it's really bad, but I didn't put it on there." And there's all these things you learn over time. And again, when I say learning stuff from the multiple list service, here's another little teaching point you can jot down, is if you look on the multiple list service, these are especially with foreclosures, but with other properties too, is, the worse the condition of the property, the fewer the pictures are going to show it. And that's basically primarily my editorial opinion, is it's the realtor. The realtor doesn't want to show that they have a crappy listing. They want it to be in the best light possible. There is the case in foreclosures where the realtor's just too lazy to take pictures, and that happens. But that's a general rule of thumb: is the fewer pictures, the worse it is. All right. So you have to figure that. You have to have those things running around in your mind. But this is when I'm looking at a property, before I get in my car and turn the ignition on to go look at something, or before I do my little analysis, I want to find out as much as I can, from behind my screen, or from whomever is the source, whether it's, the seller, you take what they say with a grain of salt. The listing agent, take what they say with a grain of salt. They might be honest, they might not be. It's usually somewhere in between. But again, the more knowledge you have on what the range of problems can be with these particular six, the better off you will be. So write down these six, and this is your check. This is your first checklist before you call your realtor and say, Brian, will you show me this property? Say, I've done as much homework as I can. There aren't any pictures. My ARV still, there's a lot there's a lot of meat on the bone, we call it, or there's a lot of pie left or whatever. It's worth taking that next step. All right. You with me? Hopefully. All right. Scope of work document. This, again, is something that everyone should do, but a lot of people don't do. I encourage this for two big reasons. Number one, I'm not a gambler. I do not like to gamble. I don't like to say, oh, I'll leave it to my contractor, or I'm just going to do my analysis and then I'm going to tell my contractor based on my analysis of my cost of the property and what the ARV is and back that out and then say, hey, Gills, my contractor, I'm going to buy this property and therefore, based on my numbers, I've got a budget of $12,000 to rehab it. Can you do it? All right. A lot of investors do business that way. And presumably some of them are successful doing it. The ones who are successful will tell you, but they might be lying. But the ones who are not successful, they're not going to tell you they're not successful. So you won't necessarily know that. You'll know that from my group, but you won't know that otherwise. I want to know what I'm looking at going in. Number one, that's it. I'm not a gambler. I want to know because I do not have an unlimited reserve fund. Here's the other thing is as an investor, you're going to need some type of a reserve fund. All right. You can't go on no margin because, again, what happens if you get to the end of the pie? The pie is coming out of the oven, and wait a second, you got to pay for the dough and you got to pay for the chair. You got to pay more than you paid before you put the pie in the oven. All right. You get the idea there. Remember the pie. There's only so much in the pie. So how do I know how much is in the pie? This is the book that contractors use. Says I always like to go up the chain and upstream and learn, when I'm working with vendors, what sources of material how do you learn to do what you do? Okay. I like to do it that way. And my contractor says, here, Brian. So he gave, I can't see it here. I got a copy of it's costestimator.com. So it's RS Means is the name of the organization. You can look it up online, but here it is. You see a cost estimating guide for materials, labor, markup, and hours. This is updated annually. This is contractors pay, big dollars to subscribe to this service. All right. I'm assuming it's all online now for contractors as well. But if I'm going to hire a contractor and he's going to give me a number, okay, where does he get that number from? Okay, well, here's where he gets that. Here's where a good contractor should get their number from. All right, a contractor can throw any number out there. All right, and if you're a novice real estate investor and they throw a low ball number out there, all right, you're seeing dollar signs in your eyes and you're saying, oh man, I'm going to be eating a bigger piece of pie because this contractor he's given me a great deal. Okay. And guess what happens? You likely have had this happen to you before. Is contractor gives you a number, sign the contract, you go in there, floors are torn out, walls are torn down to the studs. Contractor says, oh, gee, I didn't think about this. This is going to cost you more because of X, Y, and Z. Guess what? He's got you on the hook. So what are you gonna do? He's now holding you hostage, and he now has the leverage over you. what are you going to do? You're a novice investor. You're saying, "Shit, I'm stuck. I got to do what this guy says, or I can fire this guy and hire another guy. But how much dead time is that going to leave me? Because this project is costing me money out of pocket every day." So again, this is chopping your carrots and celery so you can eat it later in the week. So you're not rushing to get a hamburger and French fries if you're following me. So this is a volume of, this will keep you busy until doomsday. But this is the source. This is a good source. I would encourage you to go poke around on the website. Not right now when we're talking, but this is where the good contractors get their pricing from, and this is it gives these prices based on the geographic area of the country you are. So it's fascinating to see, what something would cost in Michigan versus what it would cost in Texas or Florida or New York or whatever like that. But anyway, you get the idea. So that's a scope of work document. So a scope of, and okay, so that's the first reason. I kind of went off the reservation here. But the second reason, again, is you're paying money out of pocket every day from the time you buy a property at the closing table to the time you sit down at the closing table on the sell side, all right, with your cigar, and hopefully, everybody is champagne and cigar, and hopefully everybody's happy with everything that's happened along the way. All right. The second reason is, what if your contractor cannot, you're a month in or 2 months in or 4 months in, and all of a sudden your contractor can't perform for whatever reason. God forbid he gets sick, but people get sick. People have family issues. People have accidents. Contractors, I worry every day about my contractor, my God, going up on the roof, falling off a ladder. Again, I'm not a gambler. If you have a scope of work document is a script, like a Hollywood script of what is happening on this project and when. Again, this is something that most people don't do or won't do because they're lazy or they think it takes too much time or whatever. And so they say, well, I got too many other things to worry about. I'm not going to worry about this. And then guess what? Well, yeah, you don't have to worry about it until you have to worry about it. All right. And then the third reason, which I only had the two, is, the second one, if your contractor can't go, then you got to have, I talk about it in the power team building, you got to have bench strength. You got to have a second contractor ready to get in the game. Okay. And then, so what do you do? How do you bring him up to speed? Oh, well, here's what Gil left, and he doesn't know where to start. If you've got a script, he can just pick up the ball and go. All right. I don't think most people are going to do this, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. But I do this, and I would do this anyway, as best I can. All right. You can't do it perfectly, but write your project out like a Hollywood script, and you can have AI help you with that. Anyway, there are some good cheat sheets and worksheets in these two books. I would encourage you. I'm not going to encourage you to buy the RS Means book because that's hundreds of dollars. If you're doing something on a big scale, it's worth it to you. But otherwise, that's a little bit too expensive. But these will get you started. All right. This book, Flip, and this book, Estimating Rehab Costs, is one of the from the bigger pockets library. These are great books. A lot of meat on the bone, will teach you tons of stuff that I'm just kind of priming the pump for you on. But if you're going to do this, if you're serious about being a real estate investor and doing deals, and if you're interested in being a flipper, if you're serious about being a flipper, I talk about this in the planning. You know, I think you have to have a pipeline of deals, and I think you have to be selling one, flipping one, and buying one. You have to have a constant pipeline of three deals, to keep the flow going. Because as I talk about it in the planning class, if you're flipping a house, you're like a realtor. Once you flip the house and you sell, and it's a race to get to the closing table to sell it, to make all that profit that you think you're going to make, okay, and have your big cigar and then go buy your big screen TV, or whatever you're going to do with the profit that you're going to make. But guess what? You're at that closing table. Now you're unemployed. You're not making any money until you do another deal. So if you're serious about doing this, you have to have the wheel turning, where you're selling a deal, you're flipping a deal, and you're buying a deal. All right. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work to get that pipeline going and to keep it going. Okay. These books will help you. And, if you're not going to buy these books and read these books, there's no point in, I can't help you is what I'm saying. And you're kind of doomed if you don't get this stuff and absorb it. So this is something over the years, and this is again something you will learn. I don't recommend. I mean, I'm not going to recommend estimating rehab costs in a particular using a particular formula, other than a really granular, detailed Hollywood script type formula. But I put this slide up because as you go out there in the real world, okay, and you're going to want to get cost estimates, and you're going to talk to contractors. These are different ways that different contractors estimate deals. Okay, so you're out there, and you know again, you're the boss because you're the quarterback. You're the quarterback of this deal, so you're going to do it the way you want it done. But you're going to have to know. You don't have to, but it's beneficial if you know how other folks estimate rehab projects. All right. And again, it may or may not translate to your project, but it's good to be aware that these are different ways that people estimate how to rehab properties. And I learned this. I learned this A, from talking to a bunch of different contractors, and B, trying to learn it, through books or webinars or YouTube, things like that, where real estate investors, oh, here's how I do it. And I've done all these big deals, and here's copies of my checks and blah, blah, blah. I just estimate it by square foot, and here's how I do it. Or I estimate it by room, or I say, oh, the roof is this, the windows are this, bedroom is this, kitchen is this. Okay. Or by the breakdown, which the breakdown way is, the big six, and then you break it down from there. All right, what am I going to have to do regarding the big six? Then you'll notice in the big six, I don't have in there like cabinets or toilets or, countertops, things like that. That's a second level breakdown. All right. So you're going to have to decide A, how you're going to do it, and B, know how other people do it. So when other people tell you, well, I estimate it this way, okay, you'll know how to convert it, or you will learn over time. So that's the reason I put this slide out here. It's not to say estimating rehab costs by, I just budget $20 per foot. Okay. You can't do that, okay? Because I learned this from one of the top investors in the group. You can't do it by, a water heater or a furnace costs pretty much the same, whether it's an 800 square foot house or a 2,000 square foot house. So it doesn't compute if you're trying to calculate something, estimate by square foot. Yet you're a novice investor, and someone says, oh, no, you do it by square foot. you're starting to self-doubt yourself and say, well, this person's experience, they must know more than I know. So I'm going to estimate it by square foot. That's kind of a natural, it's a natural thing in anything. You have to do your own learning, utilize your power team, people you trust, okay, and go from there and proceed cautiously. But this is a very complicated element of real estate investing. It's really, really highly complicated. And like anything, people want to simplify it or try and simplify it. Oh, I just do it by room. And a new kitchen is this, and a new bathroom is this. And I've got 4 bedrooms, so each bedroom is this. Okay, fine. If it works for you, wonderful. Knock yourself out. And if it indeed, if you'd say, oh yeah, all right, I'm going to do it that way. And then if it plays out that way as you do projects, all the more power to you. The other thing you will learn the most from, you learn by trying to figure out how to do it yourself as much as you can. You try and learn ideally from other people's mistakes, like guys like me or the contractors you will cross paths with. And then the third best way is your own experience. So I always say this, and here's a good point to insert it. Your best education is going to be your first deal. Your first flip is going to be your best education because you can prepare as much as you want. It's like, I talk about running or running a marathon or running a race. You can prepare to run a marathon. You can buy your clothes and get your shoes and you can do your training and tie your shoes a certain way and all that stuff. And then you step out in the race and you step in a pothole on mile one. Okay, you learn. All right, you couldn't prepare for that, but you learn by it. Anyway, I don't want to go too far off the reservation here. All right, so the scope of work document um, is what needs to be done. All right. The Gantt chart is a project management system, and this is a little bit older slide. I don't know, to be honest with you, because I hadn't used it in a long time. I don't know if Trello is still a project management thing, but there are tons of project management apps out there. But the idea is to take that Hollywood script, all right, your scope of work document, your plan, okay, you're going to need 3 days to do trash out, 4 days to tear down the drywall. Whatever it is, you're going to figure that out and put it on a timeline, okay? And like I say, this is nothing more than a project management element of the rehab process. Lots of you have done project management in whatever else your professional life is. I've done tons of them, not only related to real estate, but related to any project in any business. It's the same elements as you're putting it on a timeline. And there's certain elements of the rehab that can be done at any time. And then there are other elements, obviously tearing out the drywall. You can't put up new drywall until you have the electrical done. You get the idea. But the idea is to have a project management, going on and having a timeline. And this is keeping your contractors accountable. And there's a guy in the group who says, when he hires a contractor as part of the contract, he's going to say, look, I want you to text me at 5 o'clock every day, and tell me, are you on the timeline or not? If so, why not? Or if not, why not? If so, great. A lot of investors will incentivize a contractor to do it more quickly, not to cut corners, of course, but this is the partnership. And this is where you sit down with your contractor, with your scope of work document, with your timeline, so you're both on the same page. All right. And I see it all the time. Investors have their own other business or they're working on other projects and they have this project going on and they take their foot off the accelerator and they don't follow up and they go out to the place on Friday and they say, well, wait a second, the drywall was supposed to have been in by now and it's not in, and the contractor's not there, or that's bad, but it happens. The contractor says, oh yeah, well, my drywall guy, he got drunk the other night and he didn't show up for 2 days. I'm not making this stuff up. This is stuff that has happened on projects that I've been involved with. All right. So this is project management. You got your scope of work, what needs to be done, and then this is now putting what needs to be done on a timeline with deadlines. All right. Number three, contractors 101. I got to update my slide on this one too, but this is what I talked about at the front. Treat contractors like royalty. All right. And I learned, like anything, you learn it the hard way. But I go out of my way to treat my contractor like royalty. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't mean I'm buying them lunch or I'm buying them steak dinners all the time and stuff like that. You do that occasionally if things go really well. You share the wealth a little bit more. But, how can you treat your contractors like royalty? Well, you could refer him or her other business. All right. If your, if your contractor has kids, has a daughter who is a Girl Scout, buy some Girl Scout cookies from your contractor's daughter. That kind of stuff. That's really basic stuff that a lot of people forget about in this world, is that we're in such a race to do the deal. We're in such a race to bake the pie, get the pie out of the oven and eat the pie, that we forget about, enjoying the time that the pie is in the oven, is the analogy I'll use today. All right. Is enjoying every day, enjoying the process, realizing that it's, yeah, that's the whole purpose of the deal is making money, and all that's fine and good. But the money comes and goes. Um, the money is not, it's one indicator of success, but I've learned the longer I do this, it's no longer the main indicator of success. That I'm gonna enjoy the processes, and I'm gonna learn as much as I can from each deal, from each person that I interact with in the deal. I'm going to learn as much as I can from them, because they're specialists and they're experts in their little realm, And so that's what I'm going to do. Treat the contractor like you would want to be treated. It's the old golden rule, and that's really the most valuable way to do business. That again, it's the way I try and do business. It's the way I encourage people to do business, and it's the way I see what I consider to be the most successful investors, the way that they do business as well. All right, because your reputation is everything. And in any business, but in the real estate investing world, it's a big world, but it's a small world. Okay. And if you are an a-hole to a contractor, the word will get around. Um, that's all I can say about that. I could go off on that for you know, a bunch of time, and I want to bring this train into the station here. Um, but I hope I've gotten the point across on those. All right, the 400 item database. You can go nuts go to Lowe's.com. Go, and I encourage you, one of the first things to do as a real estate investor is walk into the project desk at Lowe's, or if you prefer Home Depot, you can go to Home Depot. I prefer Lowe's. Go to the project manager desk, introduce yourself to the contractor manager or whatever the person's title is. Say, hey, I'm a new investor. I'd like to open a pro account. Okay. Lowe's for pros, it's called. Lowe's for pros. You don't have to be a contractor to get one of those. You can just say, I'm an investor. I would like a pro account. And they will give you a pro account. They'll want to give you a credit card. You might want to get a credit card or not. That's up to you. You don't have to get the credit card to get the account. Lowe's for pros. You go on the site and it will have these spreadsheets already done for whatever project you want. Add a sunroom, redo the landscaping, you name it, pretty much it's on there. Now, of course, it's mostly designed for homeowners, but it's adaptable and it will have, every item that you need to do that particular project. So get on that. You can go nuts and do that, but that's your starting point. But I got this 400 items is just a random number, but the idea is if you're going to be an investor and you're going to do these, have a pipeline of 3 deals at any given time. Okay, guess what? I'm pretty much going to want to, if I've got a good toilet, okay, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that same toilet in all my deals. Okay, so you plug that in there. That's the same thing. I use the same example. I bought a faucet for my kitchen sink. It started leaking. I needed a new one. What do? You go on to Lowe's. There are 400 different kitchen faucets you can choose from. I want to know that ahead of time. I don't want to get to the point where I need to install a toilet and it say, well, time out. I got to figure out what toilet I'm going to buy. In the meantime, the clock is ticking. The contractors are waiting. Okay, you got the next segment of your project ready to go while you're trying to pick out a toilet. Okay, that's the idea. And I learned this from a flipper who flips seven. I don't know how he does it. He does, but he does. He flips 50 or 60 houses a year. He's got a full-time crew that, with the truck and the engine running, waiting for the next deal. And he's like, Brian, here's the spreadsheet. Here's my order from Lowe's. And I've got it here and I have it delivered on Monday. And, we go through that whole scaling piece of it. This is chopping the carrots and chopping the celery and scooping out the cottage cheese. So you've got your meals planned ahead of time. That's what the 400 item database is in the pro account. All right. That's easy. Now, if you're really serious about this, I would do this if I were starting over. I'm not flipping houses anymore. I've done it, been there, done that. I'm not interested in doing it anymore. I work with clients who are doing it, who do it. But here's what I would do. Here's what I would do if I were starting out. I would get my builder's license, michiganbuilderslicense.com, myrealestateschool.com. You'll learn much more than you'll learn from a guy like me in an hour or from any of these books or from any website or whatever. You get your builder's license. Okay. That means, guess what? That means you become your own general contractor and you don't have to hire a contractor and pay a contractor to do your flips. You pay yourself. So you give yourself that other piece of the pie. All right. Is the contractor piece. All right. You have to decide and manage. All right. How am I going to find a deal and be up to my elbows in, mud or whatever and be selling a deal? You have to figure that out, but that's a scaling issue. All right. But anyway, I would do this if I were serious about making a long-term career in flipping or even wholesaling or whatever. This is knowledge that will be good for you and be with you forever. It's really reasonable to do now. It used to be not that long ago. It was like $2,000 in 6 months to get your builder's license. I think it's like $300 now or something. But anyway, this is what I would do. But um, summary review. All right, I'm a little bit over, but not too far. Here's the action items, takeaways. Scope of work documents. You can even do if you're on ChatGPT or AI, say, hey, my real estate coach tells me about scope of work documents. What do I need to do next if I want to learn how to write scope of work documents? ChatGPT can tell you. There's detailed stuff in this book, the Bigger Pockets book, and the Flip book. There's tons of great information on writing scope of work documents in there. Familiarize yourself with the steps of the process. Oh, and I want to get you that cheat sheet where I've got 50 steps to a rehab, which I pulled out of that Flip book. Learn about project management. Okay, project management in general, project management specific to rehabbing a house. Uh, go to Lowe's today, or go online, and if you want, but I would go and introduce yourself to the manager at Lowe's, because guess what? You can say, "Hey, I'm a new investor. What can you give me the names of some contractors who I might want to, get to know?" That's network. That's my number five, networking for contractors. How do you do that? Well, you do that at networking events. You do that, you ask people in your sphere of influence. You say, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I'm looking to meet contractors who can help me with my rehab projects. All right. Or you go to Lowe's and say, hey, can you give me the names? Or, quite frankly, if you go there, on a Monday morning about 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, there'll be a whole line of contractors there picking up their projects for the week. And you can meet them there and say, hey, I'm a new investor. Here's my business card. Can I buy you a cup of coffee sometime? All right. That's that's how you get the ball rolling on the networking piece of it to find contractors. All right. Sources for the big six. You can take a picture of this slide, or I've got it in the cheat sheet that I'm going to upload in a second, because I'm sure a bunch of you have got to jump off the call shortly. Mr. Roof, HomeDepot.com has I think their plumbing section is a little bit better than the Lowe's plumbing section. Electrical, there's one called DIYnetwork.com, HVAC.com, drymish.com, landscape. Yeah, Lowe's. I think the Lowe's site is better for landscaping than Home Depot, but I think the plumbing site on Home Depot is better than Lowe's. So that's just my personal taste. Um, yeah, those are resources to start learning about the big six. All right. And this is a ton of stuff you got to learn. All right. Additional resources, the Millionaire Real Estate Investor book. You guys have heard me talk about ad nauseum. There's a book, Flip, that I talk you about. There's a book, Hold, Bigger Pockets. If you're not familiar with that, you should join that site. Investopedia is another good resource, a knowledge resource. All right. Rehab specific websites. Here we go. Lowe's, Home Depot, Home Tech Online, houseflippingspreadsheet.com, remodelcostspreadsheet.com, costversusvalue.com, familyhandyman.com. Or you can ask ChatGPT, what are the best websites for learning how to estimate rehab costs? I think I might have done that, and that's what this spit out as. But there are just tons and tons of resources out there. But again, you got to make your own pie with your own ingredients. Upcoming events. Okay, I've got 4 events coming in March. These are not all on Meetup yet, but they will be shortly. The next 2 Saturdays, I'm going to be doing events. Next Saturday is on Zoom. The following Saturday, I'm doing a new investors quick start workshop. It's going to be like a 2-hour workshop, soup to nuts, pretty intensive, that I have not done in person since before COVID, and I'm updating it. That's going to be in person. I'm going to announce it on Meetup within the next couple days. And then a financial planning session, which Again, not everybody will do, but everybody should do. Those are upcoming events. All right. Benefits of membership in the group, kind of self-explanatory. I think most of you on the call have been on the call and heard this before, or know and are aware of this. Um, Buy and read the books. Do some homework. Get this stuff into your DNA. I know I kind of turned a fire hose on for you for the last hour. Um, I do have a really, really modest membership fee if you're really going to be active in the group. And if you find value in the, I ask that show your appreciation that way. Um, that's it. If there are questions, I'm gonna stop the share.